Welcome to Work is Good, a CSM podcast. My name is Landon Buteau, and I host the show with my dad, Chris Buteau, the owner and president at CSM. Well, I've been surprised to see that one of the episodes that has gotten by far the most engagement was one that I thought would be a little bit too narrow for our audience, and it was the one on Facebook ads, running Facebook ads as a small business with Duncan Sakai. And so with that said, we've got another one that may seem overly narrow, but I think it'll be extremely valuable for those where it does hit home, where it is relevant. And so today's episode is a conversation with Cal Freitas, who is currently employed as the lead front-end engineer with Public Square. And he also does contracting through his business, Swarzy. So you can check him out there. But I think this will be extremely valuable for people who manage their own website but don't have a real in-depth knowledge. They just kind of do it because their business is in the early stages, or it's just a smaller business. Whatever it is, you're not a website expert or programming expert, but you end up managing your website. This will just give a rundown of the basics, particularly on Web Vitals, and just even if you're not the one handling those, it'll equip you to be able to know what to look for in someone or a company that does handle those for you. So please enjoy this week's conversation, and remember that if you want to get a mortgage with a broker whose experience integrity will give you complete peace of mind throughout the entire process, go to clevelandstreet.com. Calvin, thanks for joining today. Looking forward to talking website management today. And I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and just give us a general sense of who you are and what you're doing right now, a little bit about what your story is.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Landon. Happy to be here. So my name's Cal Freitas. I'm a principal front-end engineer, or also known as a lead front-end engineer, which is my title at my most recent job. And so the type of work that I do is I build websites and web applications, both for desktop, meaning laptops and those type of computers, but also optimizing them and making them responsive so they look good on mobile websites, or there are some types of applications where the website is shown in the app on the iPhone or Android. So I build websites, and they have to work in all those different contexts depending on what it is that is being built. So I've been doing that type of work for fun for a really long time. Started very early building websites, learning from my dad, who was building one for the company he worked at the time, back in the late 1990s. So I've been playing around with the basics for a really long time.
That's great.
And been doing this type of work professionally since 1998, 1999 is when I got my first full-time opportunity in a startup. So yeah, kind of a long history of doing this work.
Yeah, that's great. You were at a startup. That's where your career started out. Were you at Amazon a little bit, or were you just working with Amazon sellers?
I was at Amazon for about 9 years. So I was initially a contractor at Amazon in 2010. Got a full-time job there in 2011, and then left towards the end of 2019. So got a lot of great opportunity there to learn and work on sites like Amazon.com, which if you bought things on Amazon, I built parts of the site-wide UI framework. And I spent some time also working on the product detail page for the last couple of years that I was at Amazon. And then, during part of the time there, I was also worked on the Seller Central website, which is where sellers manage their business of selling products on Amazon. So had a lot of good exposure to that type of e-commerce. And, Amazon just sees a scale of traffic that, few other websites deal with. So that was great learning opportunity. Got to learn a lot of things about optimizing websites and code for browsers to deal with that type of traffic, and the large variety of ways that people can load that web page to, being it on browsers, in apps, iPhone, Android. There's just a huge variance in different types of user experiences just based on those user, how they're accessing it. And that means there's a lot of different types of things you discover that you need to know and change to improve and optimize a website as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited to get into optimizing websites and what goes into that, and just what things to think through as a small business owner, especially someone who has their hands in that, when you're maybe not an expert in that. Real quick, I'm curious if you with your work, are you spending so if you, let's say I listen to podcasts every morning, every afternoon, whatever, or reading articles or whatever it looks like for you to be learning more about your craft, what are the topics that you read and learn and listen and watch about to improve at your craft?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think learning and being curious is something that's very important to grow in your career. So, I commend you for looking for sources for that for your trade, and I think that's important to everybody. So for me, the types of resources I look at, a lot of it's online. Just in the sense of just blogs or news sites. Some of those are specific to technology and entrepreneurship. So especially in the tech community, there is a site called, and the URL is news.ycombinator.com, and it's kind of a tech news site for, it's got a lot of like just really detailed, deep tech articles that get posted there.
So it tends to be more like tech oriented versus like consumer behavior, or are you doing both?
Well, that specific site covers the gamut. It was originally started by Y Combinator, which is a kind of startup incubator. And so there's news that appeals both to the technologists as well as to startups and entrepreneurs. So that's one that I've been reading for a long time and has a good mix of information that kind of, fits me. Because there will be topics about web optimization, but also very detailed topics about how people have solved specific sort of startup problems, be it product or business related. That's one of my go-to sources. There's just a wide gamut of things you can find in other places. I follow a lot of technologists on Twitter and LinkedIn, so I end up getting a lot of news both from people or from companies. From some of those sources as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. Great. Well, let's get a little bit into just thinking through, website management. I'm curious if someone's been handed the responsibility, whether it's, the business owner or someone else with large responsibilities in a small business that doesn't have a ton of expertise. They've been handed this responsibility of managing the company's website or individual website, whatever it is. What are the things they should start thinking through just from a macro level before we I know there's some areas you have some specialties in, and I'm excited to hear about those, but just from a macro level, what are the questions they need to be asking, the areas they need to be even learning about in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the first thing is just learning enough of the, overall if it's an existing website, there's questions you can ask like, okay, what's there? How's this set up? Where is the domain registered? How do I make changes to this site? There's all those kind of top level concerns that, taking over that responsibility, those are kind of the initial things that somebody would need to know and find out. It's kind of a different story if it's a news site, because then there are questions like what technology do I choose? What service provider? Who do I trust to help me build this thing if, for a person that doesn't have those skills, his or herself, you need to, find somebody that you trust that you can work with to do that for you. At the start of a new project or taking on that responsibility, those are the kind of the initial things that I would ask and look into.
Yep, absolutely makes sense. And where in those questions does your specialty lie?
For those questions, very early on, even before I started doing this work full time, one of the skills that I learned was how to build websites with WordPress. WordPress is a very popular content management system. Most people that deal with websites or even use websites have undoubtedly run across something that is built using WordPress. I haven't seen the stats recently, but the last time I checked into it, WordPress was powering something around 35% of websites on the internet. So, if somebody's looking to build a new site and they just don't know what to go with, there's a really easy option. There's lots of places you can get hosting. It includes features, what's known as a content management system. So whether you want to build a blog, whether you want to build, 5 pages with the most important information about your business, like WordPress is a good default tool to use for many businesses, especially small businesses that mostly just want to provide some information about themselves. So, that's something I have a lot of experience with. I don't do as much with it, recently, but just being as prevalent as it is, I still have probably 3 or 4 websites, either of my own or like my church or different people that I work with that are on WordPress. So I end up getting to use those skills on occasion.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about managing and being aware of web vitals. I mentioned before we started recording that is something, that's a term I've heard thrown around, and it's something I know I should be aware of and at least have a sense of, again, what questions I should be asking, even if I don't know exactly what the answers are. Can you explain to me what those are, how important they are, what role they play in a person's website?
Yeah, for sure. So web vitals fit into the kind of the larger theme of working on optimizing a website, and they are essentially a way that browsers can use to determine, how efficient and how optimized this page is at loading the important things. So it was originally a standard created by Google. It's used in some other browsers as well. So it's not exclusive to Google Chrome, although that's still one of the most important areas, especially for websites in the United States. Chrome makes a really big percentage of traffic, with Safari, generally being kind of the next biggest one, or Chrome-based browsers. Anyway, I can talk about that a long time too, but we won't get into all the differences between browsers. But yeah, the point is that Google tracks a lot of data across the internet from people that use Google Chrome and are opting into certain metrics tracking in the browser. And the Web Vitals data about how the website is performing is part of what they use to make decisions about, is this website better than this other one? And like, how should it rank and how should it show up in the Google search engine results? Okay. So that's why, that's sometimes referred to as an aspect of technical SEO, which SEO being search engine optimization. So from a technical side, things like making your page load fast, and in aggregate, that means all the pages across all the page loads for every user that is hitting the page and has those metrics reported, back to Google, for example. Anyway, that a lot of that.
Yeah, so it's not just about like user experience, which is obviously important, but it's also about showing up first, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the end goal for a lot of websites is when somebody's searching for, some search term, you want to show higher in the results, because the higher you place, you're just much more likely to get your site clicked through on. So the Web Vitals and that performance optimization is just, one of the many factors that Google uses to determine who shows up where in those rankings.
Okay. So what do I do with that information? It's important. But it still sounds pretty technical to me. What should I do with that?
Yeah, for a business owner, the thing to know is that how fast your site load matters. So like from an anecdotal perspective, from your own personal experience, ways that you can test that is go to your domain, load it in a browser to see how fast it loads. And that's a one-off. Like statistically speaking, that's not going to matter as much as the what's referred to as real user metrics. So the data from all the different people that visit the website. That's what's really important. But you can get a feel for, generally how it is just by visiting yourself, testing it on your laptop, testing it on your mobile phone. But aside from that, there are also tools that, either you as the person managing the website, or if you're working with an agency, or, a specific developer, you can ask
Yeah.
them, hey, what are you doing to make sure my site's loading fast? How are you optimizing it? Just to get an idea if they have something to say, if they're considering it as they're building it, or, at times you hire somebody to come along and make updates to your site, and that's a good time to ask that type of question as well. Um, and then, for somebody that wants to dive in to learn more, to get a little bit of a flavor for what's there, there's a variety of tools available that will help do one-off tests from different settings than what you could test yourself. For example, there's this site that's been around for a long time called Web Page Test, and you can say, hey, on this browser from this place in the world, load my site and then tell me how it performed. Like, tell me about its speed. And it'll give a bunch of really specific data points as far as,
Okay.
as far as the web vitals and as far as how things went. But then it will also make some recommendations to the user as well about, again, like some of it's kind of technical, but it'll say some things about, well, there's some things you're loading that maybe you shouldn't, or the way that some of these, the way that the fonts are loading could be improved. There's a variety of things that it could tell you in the end about what might need optimized.
Yeah.
So tools like that are super helpful. Obviously, like having a developer or somebody that's just knowledgeable about that space that can kind of walk you through as the website manager, that can be a good idea too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What, how tricky is it to, and this may be too general of a question, but how tricky is it to unify your vision for me as a marketer, or as a business owner who's doing the marketing or whatever, uni- unify your vision of what the website looks like, the design, with all the functions of it and with the technical side of it? Is that are those separate conversations? Or is it I can cast a vision for whoever's doing the actual technical work? How do those come together?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, you get a little bit of a convergence of these different functions. So there's, like you said, kind of casting the vision, like what do you need this site to do, the design element, the user
Right.
experience,
Yeah.
like you kind of have to figure that out. But then you end up running into, or you can run into, how do we technically achieve this, and are there some trade-offs we need to make based on the vision, based on the user experience, based on, like, from your perspective, like, okay, what are our marketing goals? What are we trying to do this quarter? Are there things that we need to achieve? Great. What are the trade-offs so that we can get something out there, for one? Because in, like, say, for example, you're starting a new website project. Well, if you don't have a website out there, you're not going to hit any of your goals, right? So sometimes you end up with trade-offs on, okay, the perfect way to do this will take 6 months longer.
Right.
Let's pick something a little bit simpler that we can get out sooner, maybe have an incremental approach to what we're going to ship when to the user. So you end up with a bunch of trade-offs in those
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
discussions. Um,
Yeah.
but then, yeah, as far as the people involved, if you're a small business owner or responsible for a website for a small business, um, yeah, I mean, there's more than one way these projects can look, but if you've got, say a small agency that has a designer and a developer, okay, well then they're going to work together to listen to what you want done and come up with what they think that looks like from a user experience perspective,
Yeah.
and then the
Yeah.
developer will help come up with the plan for recommendations about the tools to use, for instance, like, oh, WordPress is great. Oh, maybe you should use Ghost. Maybe you should use something else. Uh, yeah. So the developer can help kind of walk through
Yeah.
some of those things.
So what are your options? Let's say in the small business world, what are your options of the different routes you can go? In my mind, there's, have a developer create everything from scratch. And then we are going right now, we have a I don't know what they would be called, an agency of sorts who specializes in our industry, and they just kind of have various templates, and then they do some customization for what we're doing. Is there an in between where you can have without having to, pay the obviously there's a significant cost of having developer develop it from scratch. Is there an in between, or what are the routes you can go there?
Yeah, I mean, you could build everything custom if you wanted to. It just takes a
Right.
lot longer.
Yeah.
So I would say there's a spectrum there for sure. Like literally build everything yourself by hand, like pick a language, pick a database, do it all from scratch. For most businesses, I don't think that's the right option,
Yeah.
especially smaller businesses. Like the use case you mentioned for your business. Yeah, finding something that's industry specific, caters well to your needs, and just gives you, 90% out of the box with a little bit of customization. That usually makes a lot of sense. I think part of why WordPress is so popular is, well, they got some things right with how it was built, because it allows for custom themes, it allows for custom plugins. So there's a large ecosystem there. Um, and coming back to that again, because it is such a big thing in the industry because of that flexibility and ease of use. Uh, a lot of times you don't even necessarily need a custom theme. There's a lot of good themes out there that fit industry use cases that provide a variety of look and feels, and often offer some level of customization if you just want to
Right.
change the colors or that sort of thing. Then there are themes that let you do that, so you can
Sure.
avoid paying, you know I mean, the cost for developers can vary a lot depending on what you're having them build, but say on the low end, paying somebody like $50 an hour up to like couple hundred or whatever it is.
Right.
If you can get something out of the box that gives you most of what you need, you're going to save a lot of money.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so that's super helpful. Let's wrap up with this. I'm curious if there is, I was curious about just to get a sense of what you do specifically about the things that you study. But is there anything you would recommend for someone in my situation or the person we've been talking about, small business owner, whoever it is who's managing the website for their company? Um, Resources that you would recommend as helpful and relevant to what they're doing, but not overly in the weeds?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how well I can answer that one because it depends on what somebody's trying to do. I guess kind of a
Sure.
general way to answer that would be, for the small business website use case, looking into WordPress, finding I mean, you
Yeah.
can find WordPress developers all over the world, but for example, I mean, I live in North Idaho now, but when I lived in Seattle, there was a good WordPress meetup community that existed there. I met people through that meetup that knew SEO, that knew tech, that knew design, that could kind of cover all aspects of it. So, making those kind of connections, like whether that's going through a meetup or just looking through, for a local agency or a local developer or designer, those are great people to meet and talk to, because they can kind of help talk, website owner through a bunch of those different use cases and provide options. A couple other things to mention, though, as far as potential options, is there are sites like Upwork, where you can find contractors for design projects, for development contracts. There's other similar sites too, that you can use. Now, I mean, one thing to keep in mind with that is that it is a good idea to go into that knowing specifically what you want, so you can be really clear with like scoping, like, hey, this is what I need done. Can you do this for me? And as with most things in life, if this is somebody's first time managing a website project, there's going to be things they have to learn. They're not going to get everything right. And that's where it can be helpful to start with kind of a more limited scope for the project up front, just so that if something doesn't go the way you expect, or you need to make some changes, if you're starting saying, hey, I want a couple of pages on my site, rather than I want this 20-page thing with custom podcasts and video hosting and all this other complicated stuff, you might be able to avoid some of that, some problems, just by starting a little bit smaller, while at the same time giving your flexibility to add those additional features later. So,
because you mentioned it, I'm curious where, if you are trying to, what are the options to host a podcast on your website, or to demo? Is it just like virtually a link to each one with like a album cover picture, or what does that look like when you?
There's better options than that. So
like, what's possible? Obviously, it depends on what's possible.
So I mean, there's plugins for different software that are going to help make some of that easier. I believe WordPress has some podcast plugins that you can use. So that'd be one way to do it. Another option is there's a variety of software as a service type of solutions for podcasting specifically. So I've used one just a little bit called Podbean. And, for those type of solutions, you got to, there's a free tier for it also, but if you want to be able to host more content, you have to start paying them, which is, I think, fine, because they're giving you that service. So there are things like that you can use, and there are ways to integrate some of those different things.
You integrate it into your website. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, like WordPress is pretty good about letting you put in links to things like YouTube videos or podcasts in a way that you can just embed it right in a post. But there's also ways of automating that a little bit more, so you don't have to manually add something every time you create a new thing.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Well, I'll let you. I want to wrap up. Just let you explain a little bit about if someone is looking for a developer that meets your situation, what are the services you offer personally, and where can they find you?
For sure. So I have a company called Swarzy, that's SWARZY.com. And, a lot of what I have been doing with that over the last couple of years is, consulting and contracting. Right now I'm kind of pivoting to doing just a little bit of consulting, because I've got one specific big project that's taking up a lot of my time now. But I've got one other contractor that I work with who does design work and WordPress work and has used other tools like Wix.com. So I've got some availability there. If you just go to swarzy.com or email info@swarzy.com, people can reach out to me there, and I can provide some more information to them.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks, Cal. Really appreciate it. It's super helpful for me, and I hope for others as well. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening to Work is Good. If you enjoyed it, share it with someone else, leave a review, and listen next week.